Welcome to Omar's Story Nook, where history gets spicy, legends get a remix, and imagination runs wild. Every tale you hear is a whisper of Omar, echoing across time, culture, and the soul. Tonight, we step into the shadowed corridors of medieval glory, into a world of iron crowns, crusading swords, and a king whose name still roars through the centuries. Richard the Lionheart, soldier, symbol, sovereign, born to the throne of England yet baptized in fire. He was no mere monarch, he was a legend in motion. But history ends him in silence. A crossbow bolt to the shoulder, an infection that spread, an empire mourning a myth. But what if the lion had lived? What if Richard survived that wound in 1199 and returned to England, not in a coffin, but on horseback? What kind of world would have risen beneath his reign? Would the barons still have rebelled? Would Robin Hood have drawn his bow? Would there have even been a Magna Carta? Tonight, we imagine the path not taken, a king restored, a nation reforged, and a Europe changed forever. Because sometimes the echo of what could have been roars louder than what was. This is the tale of what if King Richard the Lionheart had survived the Crusades, a lion's legacy, reborn. In 1199, the skies over Charles darken with storm, and a crossbow bolt slices the air, meant to end the legend. But Richard the Lionheart does not die. The wound festers, yes. Fever grips him, but through grit and grace he endures. And when word spreads that the lion still lives, the continent stirs. England, fractured, uncertain, holds its breath. Until one morning, the bells of Westminster toll not for mourning, but for return. He rides into London, not as a ghost, but as a storm in gold and steel. Scar across his jaw, a new limp in his step, but eyes sharp as ever. The people pour into the streets. They toss roses, shout oaths of loyalty. The banner of the three lions flutters over every rooftop. John, his younger brother, flees into quiet exile. Gone is the schemer who would have stolen a crown. And Richard, he wastes no time. He walks the halls of Westminster and smells the rot. Corruption, cronyism, cowardice. He tears it out. Courts are reorganized, the commoners heard. He calls a council, not of nobles alone, but of merchants, monks, and soldiers. And there he proclaims a vision, a realm of justice, a throne not above the people, but beside them. A charter is drafted, fairer, clearer, stronger than history knew. Not forced upon him like the Magna Carta, but written by his own hand. Because this lion hasn't just returned from battle. He's returned with a mission. The year is 1200. England, once ruled by fear and greed, now stands at a crossroads. The Lionheart has returned, not just to reclaim a throne, but to redefine what a kingdom means. Richard does not waste time. He dismisses corrupt sheriffs. He restores lands seized by greedy nobles. He calls for a gathering, not of barons in rebellion, but of citizens, merchants, scholars, and knights. He speaks of justice, of honor, not won in war, but earned in courts and contracts. And in the heart of Westminster, a parchment is unrolled. It is not the barons who demand rights this time. It is the king himself who offers them. A charter, not of rebellion, but of vision. The Magna Carta, reborn early, guarantees trial by jury, limits taxation, and protects the rights of townsfolk and traders alike. Richard doesn't just wield a sword anymore. He wields law. He builds schools for the children of knights and craftsmen. He funds hospitals for wounded veterans of the Crusade, and he reforms the church's influence, balancing faith with reason, tradition with tolerance. He calls his new initiative the Lion's Peace, and for the first time in generations, England feels still. But the lion has not forgotten Jerusalem. He gazes east once more, because even as England is reforged, his crusade is not yet finished. Though England rests beneath banners of peace, Richard's heart still beats for Jerusalem. He has unfinished business in the Holy Land, but this time it won't be a march of arrogance. It will be a crusade of wisdom. Rather than rally angry zealots, Richard sends envoys to Antioch, to Constantinople, even to Damascus. His letters do not demand obedience, they offer dialogue. He reaches out not just to Christians, but to Muslims, Jews, Copts, and Eastern scholars. He has learned that war cannot hold a city sacred to so many, only trust can. When his new fleet arrives on the Levantine coast, it is smaller than before, but smarter. Gone are the reckless knights drunk on glory. Now come diplomats, engineers, builders, and a new symbol, the lion and the crescent entwined on a silver flag. Richard sits in council beneath a great tent, not across from his enemies, but beside them. Saladin's successors have grown tired of war too, and with careful negotiation, they reach the unthinkable, a treaty of shared custodianship. Christians may worship in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Muslims retain sovereignty over Al-Aqsa and the Dome. Jews are granted protected access to the Western Wall. For the first time in centuries, Jerusalem breathes in peace. Richard the Lionheart, the man once called butcher by his foes, now wears a new title, keeper of the sacred city. Jerusalem rests in peace, and King Richard, once a warrior king, returns to Europe with something even greater than glory: vision. He no longer sees power in territory alone. He sees it in knowledge, in unity, in legacy. France, bruised but intact, signs an accord under Richard's banner. Normandy rejoins the crown. Flemish merchants flood into England's market. The Angevin Empire is restored, stretching from Scotland's rugged cliffs to Sicily's sunlit coasts. But Richard does not build monuments to his own name. He builds institutions. A Royal Academy of Scholars rises in London, drawing astronomers from Cordoba, mathematicians from Cairo, philosophers from Paris. Students study under mosaics of lions and stars. Women attend alongside men, an unheard of decree. Latin remains official, but Arabic, Greek, and Hebrew are taught in tandem. Richard commands that all treaties be transcribed in multiple languages. Let no man say he did not understand peace, he declares. He sends envoys to Moorish Spain, not to conquer, but to exchange ideas, and he allies with the kings of Portugal and Aragon to begin the first talks on outlawing slave markets along North Africa's coast. He builds roads that run beside aqueducts. He raises hospitals not just for nobles but for peasants and pilgrims. Churches rise beside mosques, and no temple is raised by royal hand. The Lion's empire is no longer one of conquest. It is a realm of respect, trade, learning, a Europe not ruled by fear, but guided by the wisdom of one who has faced war and chosen civilization. Years pass. The sword that once carved battlefields now rests beneath glass in a royal library. Richard the Lionheart, once feared, now revered, grows old not in exile or regret but in purpose. He walks his palace gardens with his grandchildren, teaching them to read not just the words of kings, but the philosophies of East and West. He is no longer just a monarch, he is a mentor, a memory, a movement. He dies not on a battlefield, but surrounded by those who knew him not for his conquest, but for his vision. He is buried beside caliphs and kings, in a crypt where lions and crescents are carved side by side, a symbol of what might have been a Europe not stained by centuries of war, but lifted by the bridge he built. There is no rebellion from Nottingham, no Magna Carta written in frustration, no 100 Years' War, no fractured crown. Instead, roads stretch from England to Jerusalem. Libraries glow beside cathedrals. Mosques stand untouched beneath royal protection. And his son, educated, just, and peace-minded, continues his reign not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of peace. What if Richard the Lionheart had survived the Crusades? Perhaps the kings that followed wouldn't have ruled with iron, but with insight. Perhaps the age of empires would not have begun with blood, but with books. Perhaps the world would remember not just the wars he fought, but the peace he forged. Some kings ruled with fear, others with faith, but Richard the Lionheart dreamed of a world held not by bloodshed, but by honor. He lived beyond the legends, and in this story, he built a Europe of peace, not plunder. Until the next whispers of Omar, stay listening. What if King Richard the Lionheart had survived the Crusades, the sword that forged peace?